Hey everybody, welcome back to the Connected channel. I'm Aaron Hurley. Thank you for joining me again. And I just want to say up front, if you're watching me on YouTube on my channel Connected with Aaron Hurley, thank you so much for joining me again. And if you have a moment, please click the subscribe button below and turn on the icon bell so that you know every time I put up new content. If you happen to be watching me on a post on Facebook, please make sure that you go down to the notification settings and turn on following, and then go to, on the notification settings, go to see all posts so that every time I upload something, that the algorithm is not an issue for you seeing new content every time I put up something on a Facebook feed. So thank you for doing that. Now, with this going forward here, I want to welcome you again to another episode of 5 Minutes for Your Faith. And so it's easy for us sometimes to forget that God sees all things and knows all things. And we'll see here in the example of King Asa in 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 9, what it means to live without compromise. And so let's look forward here as we go into our text this morning in 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 9 in our study today, and that is integrity without compromise. So let's read the passage together. As always, I'll put it up on screen for you so you can follow along with me. Let's read it together. For the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely his. You have acted foolishly in this. Indeed, from now on, you will surely have wars. So what we see here very quickly, King Asa was a king of Israel, and he was not depending on God's power to win this war. And there was a seer named Hanani who had come to him to give him prophecy, and he imprisoned this prophet. And so he warned him what it meant to not rely on God, to live in compromise when it came to his integrity. And now we'll see here that the consequences of not trusting God, of not obeying and following and heeding the warnings that he was sending him, that he was surely going to have wars. And we'll explain that here going forward. But let's quickly look here at the first part of this text, and that's this. Eyes of the Lord. And what we see what this means is, as it says, roving about, that it implies an ever-present omniscience as God being the creator, the Lord, and the judge of the heart. What he sees here is this. God sees and knows the heart of every person, but this context that he is speaking about, as we'll see here in a moment, are people that are truly his. God sees and knows the intentions and is able to judge the heart of every person. But he's speaking specifically to the fact that he, as creator and as Lord and judge, is not only able to see and know the intentions and inclinations of every heart, but as we go forward here, we see that he is able and willing to support and strengthen and edify the heart of those who are truly his. So let's look at that second phrasing, which is this: strongly support. This idea of strongly support means to show himself strong by imbuing strength in order for one to grow firm. What that means is that we who rely on God for our strength to accomplish whatever the daily rigors of life bring us, he tells us that as his people, the indwelling of his Holy Spirit gives us the strength to be able to not only just make it through the day, but be abounding in strength, to be beyond measure, to have a surplus of everything that we might need. And so he comes in, and those who are truly his, whom he has redeemed, who he has a covenantal relationship with, he indwells them. And whatever you face, whatever you are able to have come your way, you have everything that you need with the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. If we don't have this strength, this inward support that he's talking about here in the text, his omniscience, his all-presence, his ever-seeing eye knows who are truly his and sees the hearts of those who are truly inclined to him. And he comes to their rescue, he comes to their aid, and he gives them the strength to stand firm. Let's look at the next part, and that's this. Completely his. It means loyal, redeemed for, at peace with, in a covenantal relationship with. If there's one person that you want to be in a covenantal relationship with, at peace with, redeemed for, it's the Lord. And that's what I'm trying to tell you this morning, and that's what this passage is trying to tell you this morning in 2 Chronicles chapter 16, is that those who are truly his, he comes to their aid. He doesn't leave you hanging out to dry. So I challenge you today that if you've got something going on in your life where you need God's strength, if you're truly saved, it's already in you. You just need to surrender to it, because you can't have God's strength, you can't have God's truth, You can't have God's guidance unless you give him the steering wheel. And that's the problem with some of us today watching this video, is we have issues giving God control, giving him the steering wheel, taking him out of the back seat and putting him in the driver's seat, getting off the throne and allowing him to have the say-so in our life. Because until we give him the control that he has called for, we're never going to have peace. And that's what this whole idea of being completely his, not partially his, not partially surrendered, not partially submitted to, completely his. He only gives when we give to him first. He will give us everything we need. We need to acknowledge the fact that we need him first before he can give it to us, right? So let's look at this last part together as we look at the end, and that's this. Acted foolishly. It means this complicit, willful betrayal of what one knows to be true, an arrogant action defying an established economy of consequence. In other words, what it's getting at is this. You know better, but you do it anyway. It's this whole concept of we know what's true, we know what we ought to do, and we don't do it. It's also going even further than to think that when I know what I'm doing is wrong, I think that because I'm me, I'm special, and that the consequences of those actions don't apply to me. King Asa knew better. He imprisoned a seer, a prophet of God, and he rebuked God's discipline. He rebuked God's warning. And what happened? He said, you shall surely have wars. Well, what that means contextually for us today, it means that if you want to go out on your own and say, God, yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to do what I want. I know you've said don't do this or please do this, or if you don't, these consequences are going to come on my life. I'm going to go do what I want because I'm special and I am not going to have to endure the consequences that might happen to some other people. That's a very arrogant perspective, but there's a lot of people who live that way. And you might be living that way. You may not say it in so many words, but the way you live is this arrogant presumption that somehow the consequences or the rules don't apply to you. And so this whole idea of integrity without compromise is this. The Holy Spirit in us gives us the strength to rely on him completely. And it also gives us the conviction to know that there are things that we either should do or should not be doing. And it gives us the conviction to know that if I do what God tells me not to do, I'm going to face the consequences of his judgment. I am not special. I don't live outside of the rules. God has established an economy of actions and consequences, and they apply to me personally. So I challenge you today that if you are in an area of your life where you're not surrendered to God completely, don't be like King Asa and have wars in your life. Surrender to him now while you can so that you don't face the consequences and judgment of stupid choices later on. Thank you so much for joining me for another 5 minutes for your faith, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.